Welcome to This Got Me Thinking, where clarity comes from conversations and the connections that spark from them. I am your host, Chris LaFay, and today I have the pleasure of chatting with JL Heather. JL's story starts with what most people would call a setback, getting laid off from a comfortable agency job. But sometimes the thing that feels like failure is actually the universe simply handing you a permission slip to take the leap that you've been afraid to make. And what JL discovered on the other side of that discomfort was that the real trap wasn't actually losing his job. The trap was the security that had been keeping him from questioning whether he was actually growing or just simply going through the motions. I'll let JL tell his story.
It would have been not this last February, but the February before. So what does that make it? Like almost a year and a half ago?
Yeah.
Right on there. That's VML, the company I was working with, kind of contracted a little bit. And they were talking about, layoffs. I kind of took the opportunity to get that severance package and start setting up Centered as kind of my full-time job, because I was looking at kind of how the world worked, maybe might be the way to say it. And I've been a consistent, career reinventor over time. And it just kind of felt like time to get out there and start maybe having a little bit more control over who I worked with and how I worked. And I'll be honest, it's a different type of anxiety and stress than I've had before, but it's a different type of fulfillment and reward than I've had before. And I'm loving it. I mean, it definitely has its downsides at times, but I truly enjoy everything I'm doing. Love the people I'm working with. I think I'm, it feels weird to say it, I'm thankful to VML for the opportunity they gave me in that transition.
So many people that I talk to are founders. I just happen to run in the founders circles. And so many people have told me over the years that losing their job, insert company name here, they are so thankful for the fact that company name laid them off, fired them, contracted, whatever the thing was, to actually push that person into this next phase of being uncomfortable for a period. And everybody knows that starting up their own business is also uncomfortable. So while uncomfortable, why not just do something that's also a little uncomfortable and just kind of
Absolutely.
put it together? And rather than trying to be okay, let's find a safety net here. Let's get comfortable with the safety net, job, whatever that looks like, and then wait for a better time to be uncomfortable. No, we're already here. Why not just go ahead and let's just lean into it a little bit more, shall we?
Maybe this is a good analogy. It's like when I talk to people about having kids. Not that I do this a lot. I don't just walk up to random people and be like, "Have you thought about having kids? Here's why you should." No. But when I talk to people about having kids, the question I hear so often is, we're waiting for the right time. We're waiting for whatever, the right financial situation, the right job situation, the right home situation, or whatever. And the reality is, it's never going to happen. So anything in life, if you want to do it, if you try and wait for the right time, you're fooling yourself. And I think one of the biggest evils in the world is security at times, because it just tricks you into thinking that security is more valuable than your own fulfillment. And that can just go on and on and on and on if you let it.
How did you view your career prior to this pivot and this kind of forced turning point?
Ooh, that's a good question. It's funny, given everything I just said, I'm not sure really how I've thought much about that. I've thought a lot about how I view my career now.
Of course.
And I think that's pretty easy to see, but that's probably a symptom of feeling secure is you stop questioning. So one of the things I keep telling my kids is any belief you hold that you're not willing to question is probably not worth holding. any job you have where you're not questioning your views on that job, where you're not thinking about how you're growing, where you're not thinking about the value you're creating for people, that's probably a sign that you're done there, or you should be.
I know that, like, for myself as a leader, I definitely lean toward people pleasing, and retaining harmony. And so making those pivoting decisions and having clarity one way or the other has always been a challenge for me, because being a people pleaser, I tend to see both sides of the argument with a lot of clarity. Like, I 100% see why this is the right way, and I also 100% see why this is the right way. And so it's been an interesting challenge that where I've had to try to over time take out my preference of seeing I'm not gonna say the truth in both situations, but the elements that are correct, and the biases that I might be hearing from both sides, and be like, you know what, I'm my own person. This is the direction that I feel like we need to go, and then move forward with confidence in that direction. So we're talking about mindset shift. You got laid off. You experienced this mindset shift in some way, shape, form, or fashion. Walk me through that moment where you what were you initially feeling? What was that initial mindset? And then how long did it take you to get to this, we'll call it renewed mindset, for lack of better terms?
I was kind of lucky in that I knew it was coming. I think people who get hit with it out of the blue had no idea that it was coming. Like, as soon as I got on the call, like I knew a week or more in advance that it was very, very likely. And I had no problem with it because I kind of knew what my plan was. I won't say there was this big moment of clarity. There was maybe the biggest thing was there was a little bit of anxiety and fear of making the jump. Maybe the biggest transition was the moment when I finally had empirical proof that my skill set, the value I could create, was something that was desirable enough that people were willing to pay me a good amount of money to do it. Because I think until that moment, there's always going to be doubt. And so working at VML, I assumed what I was doing was valuable and people were willing to pay for it and all that sort of stuff. But it's hard to see in that big organization. That moment when you do it on your own and find someone to pay for it, to validate the value, that's magic, right? Like that's a drug, right? That's a dopamine hit that you're not going to recreate very often.
Speaking of impact that you make, I'm actually going to take us back a little bit to that pivoting point that you had. You had some time to plan what you wanted to do, but when you actually got started, I'm sure there were a couple of different kind of paths at your disposal. Talk to me through what kind of paths that were kind of open to you, and I'm curious if there was like a particular moment where you fell flat on your face, where you're like, I'm going to try this, and then this just miraculously or spectacularly failed. Walk me through some of that.
So my one of the things I love doing is coaching leaders. So leadership coaching, I think it's probably the way I can make the biggest impact in the world. And when I started going out there looking for clients, I had this idea in my head that leaders were just somehow going to be lining up to work with me, because really? I would say the right thing and they would just, oh, he's a leadership coach. He's an executive coach. He knows what he's talking about. And the reality is nobody cared.
But there's none of them there's nobody on LinkedIn that talks about this topic at all. I'm amazed that by just saying like a couple of words, like, I am a leadership coach, come talk to me, that people just weren't lining up like they used to for the iPhone when it came out back in the day, that you had to go get them in the store.
In my head, that's what was going to happen, right? I had talked to some of these executive coaches because I went out. I went out and I talked to people that were seemingly doing what I wanted to do. Either as part of an organization, so an executive coach embedded in an organization, or running their own sort of firm. And all of them were talking about, we have all these clients. We charge this many thousands of dollars. It's amazing. It's easy, yada, yada, yada. The reality is, and what I failed to notice is no one's going to pay attention until you start talking their language in a very personal way. So if you go out there and say, I will make you a better leader and I will help your organization increase their employee retention, it's going to result in all this saved money. You're going to productivity is going to go up and do this. No one cares. No one does. But if you go out there and say, hey, you have a problem. You aren't innovating. And because of that, you have competitors that are catching up. This is what your company needs. This is what your leadership needs. This is what your teams need to ensure they don't. And this is what it's going to look like. This is how that S curve is going to reset for you. And you're going to continue to grow. And this is what it's going to take. Now they're paying attention because you're speaking their language on a personal level. You're understanding their problem first in a way that's relevant to them rather than that's relevant to you. I think that's where the magic happens. So, I do have a business partner, Preston Chandler. We started out in the coaching only phase, and we just slowly started working our way out of that. Like, okay, what is our niche? Like, how do we focus this down so people can find us and understand that we want to work with them? And we landed on innovation, but it was a journey. And I think what you have to be careful of, and this is one of the things we talk a lot about from the innovation perspective, is that journey can't be a 3-year journey. No one can survive that anymore. That has to be like a 3-month journey. And you have to be really connected to customers. You have to have the conversations, and you have to be able to know when you're good enough to make a move, when you have enough, when you've done enough. I think that was a big part of this for us is when do we have enough information to make a pivot? And we pivoted a whole bunch over the course of a few months until we kind of landed on this innovation thing. And I say innovation thing, which there's so much packed into that. But all of a sudden, we had some customers that were interested. We got to go work with companies like Univet out in Italy, HP down in Houston, on and on. Onyx out in Phoenix, Onyx Maps out in Phoenix, like all these different people, Bushnell, Foresight Sports, all this different stuff. So we knew we had found something that resonated with customers, but even better, we found something that really resonated with us. Like, I think you have to look at both. If you have to find a niche. Once you find your niche, you can expand from there, but start with the niche and make sure it's something that gets you excited and gets your customers excited. But expect in the beginning, whatever you pick, the only thing you know about it for sure is it's wrong. You just don't know why it's wrong or how it's wrong, and the goal is to learn as fast as possible.
My question for us today is, what would it look like to actually embrace the enoughness principle? I know for me, I'm an external processor. So when I deal with a challenge, I'm going to be talking about it to quite a lot of people. And I end up spending a lot of time talking about the same thing over and over again because I'm talking to new people about the same challenge. And it's a great process for me to go through. I personally enjoy it. It's very selfish of me, I know. Because it forces me to kind of sit with either some of the decisions that I'm making, trying to explain it in multiple different ways, knowing that different people that I know are going to have different opinions and angles to take on it. And it forces me to really kind of cut away the chaff, the excess effectively. But the thing is, I do know that once I've talked to a particular group of people, whether that, somewhere around like the 2 to 4 number of very specific folks in my circles, I have a pretty good idea of what my options are for this particular decision that I'm making. And am I actually learning more by talking to 15 to 20 different people about this? Or am I just really hearing a lot of the same things? And so my challenge to you is actually a question that one of my friends poses to me all the time when I go to him for experience sharing and advice and things like that, because he's been in my shoes in a lot of my business scenarios before, is he always asks me, What is the list of questions that you need to have answers to in order to make your decision simple? Like, every big decision boils down to this. If you know what all the questions are and what all the criteria are to make this decision simple, go out and get those answers. And then you're done. Obviously, you still have to make the decision, and the decision is not going to be just purely black and white based on the answers to those questions, but you will have all of the data points that you need to be able to make that decision and make it with confidence. And so I challenge you, if you're going through a challenge, what are the questions that you need to have answers to so that you can feel confident in what is next? That's what JL got me thinking.